Hi, and welcome to Real Talk, Leadership Lessons from the Field. I'm Audrey George with Audrey George Consulting, and I'm happy to introduce two special people to you today. Bolu Johnson. Bolu is an investor at the Visualize Group, and our special guest today is Bill Forsyth. Bill is the co-founder of Frontier One. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So let's start just with who you are in the world so folks know who we're listening to today. And Bill, maybe we'll kick it off with you. Could you share kind of what it is that you do in the world and how you got into that role?
I can. It's a longer explanation. The easy part is what I do, and that can be a bit circuitous. My world is the institutional asset management world. So my firm partners with institutional asset managers from around the world, and we effectively act as their outsourced distribution arm. So we are working with firms in Edinburgh, Brisbane, St. Louis, and we are helping them raise money effectively from foundations, endowments, big state pension plans, big public pension plans, corporate pension plans, so big institutional money. I've been doing it since 1993. The reason I got into it was the reason I got into it was because I saw a need I was working for a firm that offered any number of investment options to folks in the institutional world. But at the same time, I was younger and growing a family, and I saw a need that could be filled, but I could do it on my own terms. In what I mean by that was I was able to make family a priority. So I left because I could start a company, work hard, and yet work as hard at being a father and a husband as I was at being an employee.
Outstanding, outstanding. Bolu, how about you? Tell us what you're doing and how you got into your role now.
Yeah, so I can go way back. I grew up in Chicago with a healthy level of ambition, but probably a little bit too much competitiveness and just this immense desire to understand what the world was and how to gain as much from it as I possibly could. So fast forwarding to where I am today, I actually didn't know about the world that I work in now and that Bill works in as well until I was a senior in high school. And I took an economics course where the teacher had previously worked on the trading floor in Chicago and taught everything from that financial lens. And my interest was piqued. So from there on, I started to explore that field more and more through a number of internships, not really courses because I went to a liberal arts school, but internships, work experience, and really just gain an understanding of what that was like and experience in that field as well. And over the first 6 or so years of my career, I had the ability to work at some pretty incredible institutions with some of the best practitioners in the field. And about year 6, I had been having conversations with people. I had learned a lot and still had almost no responsibilities and decided I wanted to be a little bit further up the risk curve, but doing something very similar to what I was doing basically my whole career. And the opportunity at Visualize came about pretty organically. A friend of mine was close to the founder and basically said, you should meet this guy. We hit it off. I thought the strategy was pretty interesting. I thought that he was quite compelling and had obviously done some pretty insane things in his career. So I've been at the firm for about 7 months now, and we're basically building the next generation investment firm with some pretty incredible people.
Outstanding. And so what made you comfortable, and this goes to both of you, Bolu, let's go with you first. What made you comfortable to make the jump that you each made, right? You each made a different type of a jump, but not really, right? More to a startup in both cases, very similar.
More similar than different in terms of our jumps.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say primarily it was the fact that I, in my career, had built a foundation of leaders, mentors, friends, colleagues who I could depend on to really give me very honest feedback and advice. And as I spoke to all of them, the same message seemed to resonate in the sense that you're young, you know enough, but you don't know everything for sure. There's a such thing as a measured risk, and this sounds like the perfect one. And on top of that, I spoke to the team, I spoke to our founder, and I just thought that, at a certain point, you kind of got to test your stripes and see if this is really what you're made for. And I had the opportunity to do that in this seat. So I felt very comfortable. Obviously, it's taken a bet, not only on yourself, but the people you're surrounding yourself with. And so long as you can get comfortable with that, I think that, life is short, so you should do exciting things.
I like the take a bet on yourself. Bill, how about you? What made you comfortable or what gave you the push? How did you decide to make that change?
Well, it's like we're brothers from a different mother. It'll sound very similar. So I had been at this firm for 7 years and had a fair amount of responsibility, but I think they viewed me as a younger person, and I think they on a track. And I also looked at the senior people at that time who were in their 50s, and what I saw was that they had missed their children growing up. I saw a lot of guys in their mid, they were all white males, and I saw them in their mid 50s, and they all had then achieved a level of success and look back and they missed the windows of their kids growing up. And so I just fast forward. I said, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be, in 30 years or 25 years, I don't want to be that guy. So I, like Bolu, wanted to go up the risk curve a little bit, and I thought I could take it better myself. So I partnered with somebody. There was a firm in Chicago that was looking for um, help in the distribution area, but they wanted an internal employee, and we actually flipped the script and we said, listen, instead of working for you, what we'd rather do is work for ourselves, and you hire us as a third party group. And at first they balked, but when they thought about it and talked about it with their original investor, they decided this actually made sense. You get two young people. We had a lot of kids between us at the time, and they thought, and we learned a lot in our 7 years at our prior firm. So it's a very similar story to Bolu's.
And I will say this is, for those listening, this is the first time Bill and I are meeting. We traded one message on LinkedIn. So none of this is premeditated.
No scripted. This is not
Let's keep
scripted.
going. This is fun.
Not at all. So both of you have talked about the importance of who you were working with. Kind of say more about like how did you quote unquote vet kind of the folks you're going to work with? In your case, Bolu, your coworkers, Bill, in your case, your partner. How did you know, right, that these were the right people to be partnering with?
Go ahead, Bolu.
Okay. I'd say the biggest thing for me when I was going through it was trust. In a recruiting process or any process when you're making a decision like this, time is finite. So I'd say in the perfect world, you'd have the time to meet with everyone for dinner and coffee 10 times over and really understand them the same way you would some of your best friends growing up. But that's just hard to do in this professional world. So you kind of need to hone in on one thing. And for me, that was whether or not I could trust the people that I'm working with. And I was able to discern that pretty quickly. I think my first conversation with our founder, we spoke for about an hour. It was very organic and it wasn't a formal interview by any means. And we just hit it off. I thought that he was compelling, like I said before. And more importantly, when I spoke to the people who knew him, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they always reinforced this idea that he looked out for others and, you could really trust him. So that was the biggest thing for me. And then once you have that in line, I think, things typically fall in place after that.
Yeah, and for me, my original partner, I had the luxury of working with him for 3 years, and so I had seen him and developed a rapport with him. And again, when you meet people and they have that it factor, where you just know they're going to be successful, or they have higher standards and they just communicate well. We connected and we complemented each other. We had different skill sets, and so we got along really well. And we could see how the two of us would, we always say 1 + 1 = 3. It was one of those combinations where we thought we would make each other better, and we had, as you point out, Bolu, a great amount of trust in each other. So for me, having worked with him for a few years, it made it much easier.
So, Bill, I'd love to dig into that concept about kind of how you complemented each other. I talk to leaders often about the importance of building teams that aren't just naturally aligned, right? Like you want to build towards alignment, but when you just kind of get people that are going to agree with you and we're all in the same lane, swimming in the same direction, whatever metaphors we want to use here, we miss things, right? So talk to me about kind of the 1 + 1 = 3.
It was different. I would say different style of communication. In terms of Tom was my original partner. He was outstanding and developed a lot of a great rapport, very diplomatic. But his path of getting from A to Z would be possibly more meandering than mine. For those that know me, I'm more direct, and I will say, I'll try to say it as diplomatically as possible, but I get right to the heart of the matter because I think that's, if you dance around topics, sometimes they don't get fleshed out correctly. So that would be our primary style difference. And yet I'd like to think we were both very professional. So same level of professionalism, but different styles of communication. And, and yet we both kind of attack things with humor. I would ask more questions. He would provide more examples, that type of thing. So we just had different communication styles that worked well together. And I think when you have clients of all different types. And my style might be better for some clients. His style might be better for others. But when you're in a room together, you always get the answers you need one way or another, and you do it in a way that is, I think, um, not off-putting to any clients or prospective clients.
I
Makes
had
a lot
a
of sense.
question following up for that, if it's okay. How did those two styles balance internally? As you guys built a team, you were more direct, he was maybe more meandering, or however you describe his style. When you think about leadership and building a team, how do you think those two combined to what you guys eventually built at the firm?
I think so. At our peak, we probably had a dozen people, and I would say different people were a style of had both of our styles. And he would come across somebody in a meeting and say, "Hey, this person would be a great hire for these reasons. Young, he's young. He commanded a room. I just saw him commanding a room. He was going through a search process. He was 27 at the time, and so I would meet with him, and you have to ultimately you're looking for people who are effective. How they get there is less relevant than the fact they get there. But I always believe that different styles and diversity of thought makes for better, more robust decisions. So I like when people poke holes at my thought process and say, "Have you thought about that?" That makes us all better. So I would say consciously look for people that had different styles, and some might reflect my personality more than his, and others might reflect his more than mine.
Yeah, Blue, I'd add to that. There was a point in my career where I was kind of leading an organization, and somebody running one of our kind of departments was extraordinarily strong leader, could have been running the organization herself. But we really kind of wanted to work together, and we had very different styles that really worked for the sake of the organization and everybody we were working for and with. But we had to work really hard on that relationship for it to work. Like, we were very intentional, and we spent a lot of time at the beginning talking about, like, this is what I see. This is the frame that I'm looking through. What do you got on your side? And then we'd kind of like get there eventually. But it was intentional. And it took a lot of work, but really well worth it, I would
Are
say.
you tackling the same things, Bolu?
No, I mean, similar things. I think that uh, as you get into a new place and you start to work with people for the first time, you start to learn how to balance different styles of work, and you start to learn what works best for different people and how to fit your natural style within that. So I think from that perspective, those insights are very helpful.
There's some tests that you can have folks take that we can talk about offline that kind of let you understand like who people are, how they communicate, how they function, and what the best way is to interact with them. Some of those tools are for like coworker to coworker, others are for like manager, to be like,
Yeah.
how do I kind of, what's this person actually going to be motivated by? So there's a number of different indices that are available that I think provide a lot of insights that people, I think I don't know if if you all use any of them, but there's
I've definitely heard of them in the past.
I think they can be. I don't know, Bill, have you used any of those tools?
The answer is we've taken, so when we were younger, we took them, and I know what I know my profile. Tom, I knew Tom's and he knew mine, but it wasn't a condition of employment because we ran a very small firm. So it was really, it wasn't as structured as that.
Right. And so I think kind of where they can be helpful is like you understand like kind of basically how people are quote unquote programmed, for lack of a better word. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they're driven by these three things. We overlap in two of them. We're very different in the third. I see now why this is always the approach that person is taking, right? And then also it gives you, these tools usually give like good clues as to like this person reacts best when, this person is best motivated by, right? And they're not always 100% correct, but they're pretty accurate in my experience.
Yeah, and I guess what we tried to hone in on Bolu was really finding self-starters. So we did not want my strength is not management. My strength is being out in the field. My strength is communicating with it. And so we really try to find folks who are disciplined, who had much of the same, not same style as ours, but got the same results, but had the discipline to do so. Whether or not we had one worker that was completely remote, he was one of our most effective employees. He would be in the office maybe once a year, but and this is before Zoom. So, you have to have faith that he's going to get his job done. We also structured pay so that everybody would learn a decent living, but no one would learn an exceptional living unless they were doing the job. And so that let us sleep at night that we weren't going to pay big bucks to somebody that might sit around and do nothing.
Incentives help.
Incentives are huge.
Bolu, other questions that you have for Bill?
I think the biggest one that I was wondering is you started a firm, you're now 20 odd years into it. It sounds like you're very much the leader in the situation. I'm curious, two things. One, if you still find yourself being led, whether it's inside the work space or outside of it. And two, how you think about an effective, what's the right term here? How to be led effectively. So the people you're leading, how do you see what qualities the ones who are most successful or most receptive having? And even yourself, if you find yourself being led at this point, how you think about that from your position.
Yeah, that's an easier question, and I'll probably answer part of your question. Feel free to probe deeper on the other part. But yeah, so my original business partner retired in 2008. I have a new business partner, and I learn from him every day. He, again, this is somebody completely different. He has a very different style as well to mine. Um, while we both been in the industry for decades, we know a lot of different people, and he is very tech savvy. I was much less tech savvy, and so the more we work together, the more he gets me up the learning curve on how best to use LinkedIn, how best to use some of these tools at our disposal more effectively. So I would say, but you have to be open to growth. And so I'm always open to growth. You know, I'm at the stage of my life where I don't have to work. I work because I want to work, and that's a very fortunate position to be in. But that also, I think, speaks to the fact that I love the business. I'm competitive by nature. Um, I push myself innately every day, and so when I can learn things from him, I'm open to that. So whenever I can learn from anybody in an organization, I am open to that. So I think I'm particularly good at certain things, but there are a lot of things I'm not good at all.
Yeah, that openness is helpful. And maybe taking a step back from that, like, what do you see a leader as in your mind? Do you distinguish it from a manager, friend? Like, how do you define it when you think about that?
I guess I've never defined it, I guess in a loose way, what I would define leadership as being open to growth, providing a vision, providing strategic help and telling people where we want to go, but being open to the fact that it's never a straight line. And so, and there are different ways to get to that and different styles that get you there. So I embrace, again, it's like if you have some point, Bolo, do you have any children?
I don't know.
Okay, well, at some point you might, and if you do, you realize that you embrace your children. A lot of you can't. The same gene pool can create very different kids, and so you embrace those differences, and those differences everybody learns, within a family from those. And when you have a small company, it's like a family. You're part of these folks' personal lives. You know them because you work so closely with them. I would say that we always used to laugh. There are no secrets. I mean, and I won't get in detail, but there really were no secrets. So my leadership style is collaborative, um, family oriented, work hard, play hard is a phrase I use a lot. And when people are on vacation, I tell them I don't want you checking in. To the extent you get just check. The whole you need a break, check out. So my and learn from folks. So being open to growth. So it's kind of a long circuitous response to your answer.
But a helpful one.
I hear you saying kind of the vision piece, right? Like setting the vision. I think that's maybe the number one role of a leader, right? Is to set the vision. But I think like 1A or 1B is like that others will follow, right? And you kind of have to motivate folks to follow. You do the best idea ever. You can have
Yeah.
the best kind of plan ever. But if you're not someone that people are going to follow, that you're not going to get very far. And so kind of in that mindset, I think for me, I would offer that the best leaders I've seen are lifelong learners. They're people that just they love to learn from any situation, right? They come out of, folks that come on this podcast come off and say, "Oh, I learned so much. This was amazing." And they're the established leaders, right? They're the senior quote unquote folks that are here to teach, quote unquote, the rest of us. Except for they're learning just as much because that's how their mind works, right? And they're
Exactly.
looking for opportunities always.
I agree. A lot of I'm a big reader, and I think a lot of good
Yeah.
leaders are readers for that very reason, because they're in perpetual learning mode, because you can learn a lot, and you try things out. You learn something, you try it out. Maybe it doesn't work. That's okay. I'd be curious though, Bolu, for you, with regard to there's long-term strategic goal setting, and then there's the whack-a-mole that is your day to day, and sometimes
Yeah.
they can interfere with each other. How do you address that?
Yeah. I try to keep a long-term mindset with a lot of these things, but understand that long-term comes from the building blocks that are the day-to-day. So, you know, I wake up every morning really trying to tackle the day, but in the back of my mind, I think you have to be extremely thoughtful about how each and every move you make on a day-to-day kind of impacts that long-term goal. And for me, it's just setting that North Star, occasionally, whether it's once every year, once every quarter, and making sure on a day-to-day, looking forward that what I'm doing aligns with that. And then even being reflective when I'm resetting those goals, that what I have done aligns with that. So to answer your question, it's kind of that balance of really having a North Star or a rock that you'll always come back to, but understanding, as you probably know, that this world gets hectic day to day. I think one of the most interesting parts of this job, and also the most challenging, is that no day is the same. So you'll wake up and you'll think that your day is going to be one way, and then by noon it's completely turned on its head, which is exciting. But there are ways to fit all of those experiences uh, into your ultimate goal, is my perspective.
I would agree. And what you said, no 2 days are the same. That's precisely why I love this industry. No 2 days are the same. You learn something new, different and different every day, which I find very interesting and more intellectually stimulating, which I have to ask a question, because the biggest question on my mind, and speaks to this, um, folks of your generation often talk about balance in their life,
Yeah.
and achieving balance. I'd love to hear how you define balance and how you achieve balance in your life, and what that looks like.
Yeah. So I will, I'll also have to preface this one with a reminder that we hadn't talked before this, but I have done some research and obviously heard some of what you've said so far in this interview. And I think that I take a similar mindset. I think that in order to accomplish anything, you have to be very committed to it. Whether that's work, whether that's relationships, whether that's anything else that you look to accomplish during life. And one thing that a mentor from my previous role, who I actually just spoke to recently, one thing he told me when I was leaving, when I asked him a very similar question, was there are times in your life where things that are all priorities will take different levels of priority. So there will be times where I'm busy at work, or there's something I really want to get done, and work will be my end all be all. And my other priorities, family, friendship, whatever, might have to take a back seat, obviously save any emergencies. And there are other times where, I don't know, you're going through a rough patch in your relationship, or there's a family issue where that'll have to take precedence. Um, and you do what you need to at work, but you understand what the priority is at that point. So all to say that I think it takes a level of flexibility and nimbleness to really understand when you're in each of those moments in life. And I've tried to adopt that approach pretty recently. So there's no set balance. I'm not saying, 9 to 5 is work, 5 to 7 is friends, 9 to 12 is me. I think that, as we were just talking about, that changes on a day to day. And again, to the extent that you have a North Star, either for your life as a whole or for each of those different pillars in your life, I think that you're better able to be flexible around how you shape your life to meet that. So, no, there's balance, but it's not formulaic.
All right.
Yeah, Bill, how do you approach that? Because this has been a driving force for you forever.
Uh, I start with family and build out from there. And part of the beauty of my job, and Bola, you might be able to relate to this, you have clients and the clients all want you, to be in front of prospects. And so they're looking for a lot of your time. I start with, okay, is there a family vacation? Let's get the family vacation on the book. Let's make sure any type of personal commitments are on the books first. And then I'm happy to devote whatever time, and there's plenty of time left, but I'm happy to devote that time to clients. So I start with, let's get the personal time in the books and then build around it. That's
So
how I.
that's beautiful, but I think probably unique in this industry. Um, but you've obviously been very successful. I'm curious how have you navigated that? When has that approach been challenging? When have you found it to work less?
It works less. I mean, you'll relate. It's a good question. It works less when things come up. So you've got, let's just say, it's our kids' lacrosse season, and I know they've got a couple of big games this particular week. Well, 3 weeks before, you might say, hey, we've got a finals presentation in Jackson, Mississippi, and we need you down there. In which case, you know what? You can't work around that. They need you there. And so, but if the games are on the schedule, if the vacation's on the schedule, if the school commitments are on the schedule, did I miss a few things? Yes. But my hit ratio is probably 90%. And so you do get pulled away. And I would say, the family always realized, my wife and my kids always realized if I got pulled away, it wasn't just because I didn't feel like going. So, and because they saw me at the other games, they cut me slack for those that I couldn't make. So you're right. It's not perfect, but if you start with that, and work your way back, it is better.
Yeah, and what I'm taking from that, which is something I've been thinking about a lot too, is that you kind of have to understand what your priorities or your non-negotiables that may become negotiable, whatever, we'll ignore that caveat are, because this job, really anything you're committed to can take as much time as you give them, or as you give it. So, you know, finding those areas that are really important to you that fulfill you, um, and trying to prioritize that and kind of letting things push that when necessary rather than going the opposite way and trying to fit it in, I think is a really healthy approach to it.
Yeah, again, I read this years ago, and and it's not, I didn't make this up. I'm sure you both probably heard this, but you start with the end in mind. So again, picture yourself in a casket at the end of your life. What do you want people to say about you? And that's where I started. And I didn't want people to, again, they make the joke like, no one ever said, I wish she spent more time in the office. When they're in their deathbed, they're not going to say, I wish they spent more time in the office. And so I always started with, what are my priorities in life? At the end of my life, what do I want to look back and say I've achieved? Or, what are the most precious achievements? And, you know, work time wasn't one of them. And it's, but, um, giving to others and providing educational support to those that otherwise, don't have it, or being a good father and a good husband. That's what I started with. And then you work back to that and you try to kind of fill that in along the way. So that, I would encourage you. It's always a good exercise.
Going way back, well, two things. One, a quick detour. What do you read? Is it mostly nonfiction, fiction? We can have this
Mostly,
conversation over coffee in Chicago.
yeah, mostly nonfiction. I
Okay.
love, I love history.
Yeah.
I love nonfiction. I love biographies. Um, and everything from like a Moneyball to a John Rockefeller bio to an Alfred I'm sorry, um I'm blanking. But any kind of good biography is, I think, interesting.
Nice. We should trade notes on that at some point.
Winston Churchill
Um,
is the name I'm trying to come up with. Winston Churchill, I think, so fascinating figures in history, I think, are interesting.
yeah. And then my follow-up question to your response was, where did that come from? Where did that, like, as you think about what your priorities were set at, how did those come about?
Probably, well, two ways to answer that. One is, there's a level of self motivation, and I think all of us have that. And so you have to look inside, so I'm very self motivated. Beyond that, that was cultivated when I was very young by my grandparents, especially my grandfather on my dad's side, who really talked about the importance of education, talked about the importance of communication, talked about, how really to effectively communicate with people, and that, when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, that kind of sinks in. So I would say it's a combination of, um, family values and self-motivation. How about you?
I'd say it's the same. My parents are immigrants. They sacrificed a lot in order for my siblings and I to get what we've gotten. And I think that from a young age, they were never very explicit about that sacrifice, but for some reason, I always had a feeling that I wanted to do something or make something um, of myself such that like that sacrifice never felt wasted, even though I never fully understood or grasp the weight of it at an early age. So I'd say that's the biggest one. And from there, like, I think that's where the ambition comes from. I think that's where the drive comes from, where the family values, the importance, um, relationships come from. I'd say the other one is probably my faith, which aligns with a lot of that. I grew up Christian and recently came back to my faith in the last few years. And the more I've kind of delved into that, the more I've realized that a lot of what I want to accomplish and a lot of what I want to be to the world is pretty aligned with that as well. So those two things, one started a little bit earlier, one has been more of a recent development, but I'd say today both combine to keep me going.
And what would you say? I think I know how you answer this question, but I have to ask because you kind of uh, meandered around it. But what would you say are the most important values your parents instilled in you? What are their priorities? What would their priorities be for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard work. I think it's honesty. Honestly, it's a combination of both what you could do uh, internally and what you could do externally. So internally, it's how do you approach the world? How hard are you working? How motivated are you? How much do you care about what you're doing? Regardless of what it is, you should care about what you're doing. And then outside of that, like how do you present yourself to others? So I'd say respect is probably one of the biggest things. I think that comes along with leadership and what you guys talked about, motivating other people. It's easy to be put in a stature or a position of leadership, but in order to be effective in that, I think that there's just a requirement of respect from those that you're leading. So that one was instilled pretty early on. Um, Love, kindness, all the like the good fruits that you can imagine.
Yeah. I'm going to add two that I think are really important, and I think and you,
Please.
uh, one is humility, and the other
Yeah.
the other is authenticity, and those are attributes you can't fake. And so I just think I guess I'd say, as Audrey has known me for years, I can be very direct, but I'm very authentic in that, and I also am very humble by nature. And so when I am dealing with people, and this gets kind of the leadership as well, when I'm dealing with clients, I can be direct because they know it's authentic, and I'm not. There's no ulterior motive. I'm simply trying to make them the best they can be. And I had this discussion with a client just last week. I said, he said, he said, I think I'm afraid of you. And I said, I said, I think I'm approachable. I said, I understand what you're saying, but I said, keep in mind, I said, I know how good you can be, and I know what you can attain. And so when I see that, you fumble out opportunity right in front of you, that is right there because you didn't follow instructions, I'm going to provide you a constructive criticism. Do not take it personally, but I said, I'm just trying to make you better. And he gets it. And so I think I can get away with being direct because if people realize I just have their best interest at heart, it's not personal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. You and I line up on this like a lot, right? We're very similar in this regard. And I think this also aligns, Bolu, with what you brought up earlier about trust. Like people understand and trust that one, we're telling the truth at all times. And that two, like because we spend time building the foundation of that relationship and helping to build people up, when we come with kind of tough feedback, right? People understand that it really is from a point of I'm trying to help you be better. And in every single case, we're also interested in the same, right? Like I would want nothing more than either of you or anyone else to call me and say, hey, you know how we could do even better on this podcast? Is if you dot, dot, dot. Love that feedback. That to me, that's like a sense of kind of care and commitment, right? And an opportunity to learn. But it's also built on the trust, Bolu, that you talked about way back at the beginning of this, that I think is core to kind of everything.
Yeah.
Let's stick on that for a second. I think there are a lot of analogies between the world we live in and sports, or at least I like to think so because I had hoop dreams at one point, which were spoiled when I averaged probably 0 minutes a game in eighth grade. But um, when you were talking about being direct in that approach, I thought of the late great Kobe Bryant and how he was kind of known to be hard. Same with Jordan, hard on his teammates, hard on those around him. But for some reason, everyone understood that it was for the betterment of the team, and they trusted that he had their best interest and the organization's best interest in mind. That's one of the things in my mind that I think you have to build up over time. But having now done that with your clients, with your colleagues, looking back, like what is it that caused them to trust you? Like what reassured them that now Bill can call and be hard on them, that it's not because you're a bad person or you hate them or you're jealous or any of these negative things. It's truly because, and they know this, that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah, so I'll answer that a couple ways. Initially, it was not easy because I left to start this company. I was 29 years old with 2 kids, but that's why they trusted me because they realized, okay, here's a guy leaving a good job at a good firm to start his own company with this other guy, and between them, I think we had 5 kids, and we were staking our future on helping this organization. So I think they had to have some leap of faith that, okay, these guys must believe this is going to work because they're leaving a lot to make this work. Then it gets, as the years go by, if to whatever level you have success, that makes it easier because then firms, I laugh about the fact that early on, a lot of a lot of our successes in landing managers was more outbound. We were calling them and engaging with them. But as the years go on, as you have more and more success with your current clients, people start calling you. And so you have that innate, the trust, and you don't have to make any more calls. It's not that you don't, and it's not that you're arrogant. It's simply that you've got as much business as you want. I've never wanted 10 clients. I've never wanted more than 4 or 5. And so you find the right mix, and you can get more selective. If you have the good fortune of success, you can be more selective in the clients you take on. And for me, that looks like a better cultural fit. I've worked with some people I would never want to hang out with. And I just said literally a few years ago, I'm at the stage in my career, later in my career, I am not going to work with people I don't really enjoy culturally and that I don't trust because life is too short and I don't need to at this point. So, as time goes on, it kind of answers itself, Bo, to be honest.
What about internally with your colleagues? How'd you build that trust?
I think honestly, it's like walking the walk. And when it's being effective. It's being effective. It's laying out the vision that we talked about. It's playing the whack-a-mole game every day. And when people see it, it's lead by example. If you lead by example and you're the one driving that success, and again, over the years, again, this is not to sound arrogant at all, but a lot of the success our firm has had has come as a result of relationships I've developed. And so when other employees see that and they say, okay, how'd you do that? How'd you make that go from A to Z? And you walk them through it. Sometimes they can replicate that. Sometimes they don't have the personality to replicate that, but they learn. So it's leading by example.
I would also add, Bolu, one way that you show people that you're legit is telling the truth when the truth is hard, right? It's easy to sugarcoat. It's easy to skirt topics. It's easy to kind of meander around things. But when things are hard and you kind of just call it out for what it is and say, this is going to be a rough period, that builds great trust. I've worked with organizations who have tried to act like everything's fine and push through at a time when things aren't fine. And I've worked with organizations that have asked me to come in and say, like, I need you to give your entire assessment to the entire organization. I want you to tell them everything that you have found because we got to tackle it. We got to tackle it together. And I want them to hear all of it. And it's like, and those are the companies that turn around the fastest and that the people have the most trust of the leadership, because it wasn't that the leader took and the piece that they wanted and said, well, this is the report we got back. Look, we're doing great over here. And there's maybe 1 or 2 things over here we should work on. These folks said, no, I need you to stand in front of the room and just say all of it. And then we can decide what the group wants to prioritize and we can dig in. And in every instance, that has garnered such great trust and motivation that this is now a leader that people want to follow, right?
Yeah,
Kind of back
it's
to
a
the,
great point, Audrey. Again, when you give unvarnished advice that turns out to be true, then you build a huge amount of credibility. And
right.
I mean, we would have managers say, I've outperformed for each of the last 5 years. I'm never going to underperform. And say, no, no, you're going to underperform. You're going to lose clients. And you tell them things they can't believe because they've never been in that. They said, no, I mean, how can that be? And then it happens, and they realize, okay, maybe I don't have all the answers. I mean, you and I work in an industry, Bolu, that has very bright people. And um, as I say, a lot of times those people, because they're so bright, think they have answers to everything. And when they realize, no, 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 you don't have the answers to everything. You got to get back to humility. You have to have some humility. But when you can say, this isn't going to be a good year, or or this is going to be actually a better year than you think, and it plays out that way, the credibility factor goes way up.
Yeah, to your point, Audrey, actually to both your points, my first job out of school was in banking, and the head of banking at my firm at the time used to always say that the best advice he's given clients is at times not to do the deal, which you can imagine at a bulge bracket bank isn't the easiest thing to say because the fees are out the window. But I think that that's exactly what you guys say, like saying the hard things that might be true when they matter are difficult. And the other part about that is it marks the importance of this being a long-term game, whether
Right.
it's career, the relationships, all those things, because you're not going to reap the rewards of giving the hard truth immediately. But Bill, like you said, it's down the line when they realize, oh, wow, Bill was right. Bill was thinking in my best interest. I didn't like to hear it, but it was the thing I needed to hear. I think that's when it becomes really important.
Agreed.
Gonna take us to wrap up a little bit here with two final questions, and I'm gonna bring to both of you. And Bolu, let's start with you first on this one. What's the best leadership advice you've heard so far?
Uh, that's hard. I've been fortunate to have a lot of conversations with some pretty great leaders. I think that the best theme that I've heard across them all is really, I'd say, the golden rule and to treat others the way you want to be treated. And I think that's important in leadership because it's kind of the foundation of everything we've talked about, the trust, the commitment, the care, the honesty, integrity. Um, I think that having that in the back of your mind, you're able to kind of better understand the people that you're leading and through that communicate a sense of care that really helps motivate them and understand that you're taking them to the right place.
Bill,
I
how
would,
about you?
I would agree with the honesty and integrity. You can't, again, that is critical, and that's built over time. And as I've said to people, it takes years to build and it could take seconds to lose, if you have that. So honesty and integrity are critical. Always act in the client's best interest. Always do what's best for the client. And we literally design our agreements with clients so that we are completely aligned. So that, and that they sleep better at night. That way, when we give them tough advice, or we say, listen, you really, you need to take a lower fee on this for these reasons. We're taking this a lower fee as well. So they know that we're not giving that advice because we want the business, and it's not just all about booking revenues. It's about building for the long term. The only other thing I'd add is, and this is on a different track, but I think it's important for leadership. Um, we have one client in particular that's very astute at building a team that's, when I say diversified, they think of diversity in a number of ways. They think of diversity in terms of background and experience. They think about it in terms of gender. They also think about it in terms of age. They have people in their 50s, they have people in their 40s, they have people in their 30s, and they intentionally are hiring people in their 20s. And it's very thoughtful because folks like you are different than me, as we discussed at the very beginning, and you have a different perspective, which is really additive for people at the stage of my career, having a diversity of thought. Say, hey, here's the way a lot of people my generation are thinking about that issue. And if you get that up and down the curve, you really have a more robust discussion, and you come up with a better solution. So I thought, really good advice.
All great input. Last question, Bill, let's start with you. Is there a mantra, like a leadership or a life mantra that you live by? Something that, like, when the times get tough or when you need a little motivation, do you have a go-to thing, go-to saying?
It's going to be something I already said, and that's be yourself. Again, you can't, and that gets to authenticity. People know you And if I were to act a way, Audrey, you've known me for years, if I were to act in a way that was different than what you kind of call me out and say, who are you? You know? And so again, I don't have all the answers. I have plenty of faults, but people know who I am, and I don't need to be all things to all people, nor will I be, but I just try to be the best person I can be. And so I would say be true to yourself and be authentic.
Appreciate that. Blue, how about you? A mantra that you live by?
I mean, I like Bill's a lot. I'd say for me, it's count it all joy. I think that life throws you a bunch of twists and turns, and every day is different. Some days will be harder than others, but really understanding that there's something to be learned in each experience, the good and the bad, and something to be gained from that. I've learned in my short career so far that perspective is insanely important. And just having that perspective that, everything's a gain, I think can take you very far and helps put life into context.
Everything's a game. Love that. Well, thanks so much to you both. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate this conversation, all the insights that you shared. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks, Audrey.
Always a pleasure.
Likewise. We'll have to talk books at some point.
We will. Thanks so much.